Welcome to Franklin Covey's C-Suite Conversations. My name is Patrick Ledden, and each week I have the opportunity to sit down and talk to an executive leader about their life and their career, what they've learned along the way, the struggles they've overcome, and the successes they achieved, all with one end in mind, to help you, the listener, learn what you can apply in your life to accomplish what matters most to you. Today, I'm joined in C-Suite Conversations by Dr. Wendy Walsh. She's the Chief Learning Officer at Air Education and Training Command. In her role, which is enormous, she's responsible for helping develop over 800,000 people. If you talk about developing people and leaders at scale, that's what she does every day. In our conversation, we talk about her career, what she's learned along the way, and some of the insights that she can provide to you to better see people and to be a more effective leader at whatever level you're at. I think you're really going to enjoy her energy, her insights, and her enthusiasm as we get together about a C-Suite conversation. Dr. Wendy Walsh, thanks so much for joining me today for C-Suite Conversations.
Good day. I'm very excited to be here with you, Patrick.
I'm excited to be here as well. This is one of those conversations, folks, where we start off chatting before recording. And then after a few minutes, it's like, we better get started because there's a lot of great things that are going to be shared today. So, Wendy, it's often helpful sometimes for people to go, okay, who's the person on the other side of the microphone? So if you wouldn't mind, would you share a little bit of your career journey? Like, how did you end up being the person you are in the role you're in today?
Yeah, those are always a good question. And there's so much when you've had 3 decades of public service to think about what's important on the journey. And it all is. I mean, it all compounds and builds up to who I am today, and the things I do today and over the next few months and years will make me who I am, then. So I started my my public career working for the state of California. And I worked actually in a large state hospital, a place for people to live who had different abilities. So they might have cognitive or physical differences in abilities, so they couldn't walk as everyone else maybe can, or communicate. And they had just very challenging times managing life, and so really needed a lot more care than maybe other people did. Now it's so wonderful. A lot of these congregate settings where people lived in the past in state hospitals no longer exist. There's not even one in California anymore. But it really was a pleasure to start my career there, because working with people who are managing different or disabilities, you really have to look for the good and look for the possibilities. And so my first 12 years of working in government, I was looking for possibilities. And in that job, I had an opportunity to actually do some innovation. If you can imagine, I don't know if the people listening can imagine how old people are, but imagine before email, how we got things done. Imagine how before being able to use a company credit card, you got things done, doing things in triplicate, having mimeographs, ultimately getting a pager and being so excited about that communication or the Nextel phone. So my career has been amazing to go from very minimal to no technology for communication and business to having so much technology for communication and business. And so it's really made things so much more accessible. Here we are, we're having a podcast. I didn't watch podcasts at the beginning of my career. So I went to conferences to meet people and to hear their stories. And I got to hear so many stories a year. And now it's endless. However many stories I make time, whatever topic I'm interested, I can find information on that. So starting my career with people with different abilities, looking for the good in people, just really grounded my whole outlook into possibility. That if you have somebody who maybe struggles with the simple task of tying a shoe, and over a period of 5 months, they're independently tying a shoe, and the level of excitement that happens for the learner and for the person who's been working with that person, it's just incredible. That job is also an incredibly stressful job. There's lots of uncertainty in the job. It's just very hard. It's physically and mentally and emotionally demanding. And I worked with great leaders who are always looking for innovative ways, and also looking for ways to incorporate fun and play and good, authentic communication. Starting my career off with leaders like that, I had a head start. I had a real head start. And I'm still friends with a lot of them on Facebook now, which we didn't have then, and staying connected to them and letting them know, and regularly reaching back and saying, I'm where I am today because of you, because what you taught me and the foundation that you taught me. So I'm regularly reflecting and thinking about all of the leaders and coworkers, friends and family who have really helped me learn lessons that have helped me to do better today than I was doing before. After that, I got this great opportunity. Well, just to step back, I did my education, my undergraduate and my graduate, while I worked full time, and that was an interesting process too. So I always like to tell people that, because I think sometimes we think education is not accessible if you don't have time, if you have families, if you have a job, you can't do it. But I think you can do it. You just have to be creative. Most of my projects and papers were based on work I was doing, so I was always navigating and negotiating. How can I integrate my work into my learning, which was also a great thing, a kind of gift that I received. So I'm constantly thinking about how, when I have a work challenge, what research can I do to understand and find possibilities? What data could help me to understand the questions I have? So really kind of formalize scientific thinking into my work life. And I think by having to go to school while I was working, that nexus was strengthened in doing that. When I got my master's degree, I found I qualified for this wonderful opportunity called the Presidential Management Fellowship Program that still exists today. And if you make it through all the wickets, they accept your application, you go through the interview process, then you get to work with any federal agency that you can kind of convince they need you, and they are looking, you find that nice match. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that had really impacted me was 9/11. It happened about 2 years before I finished my degree and got the Presidential Management Fellowship. So when I saw that the Department of Homeland Security had opportunities for Presidential Management Fellows, I jumped into that opportunity. I really wanted to be in a space where we could create more unity. I don't know if many of our listeners were around or thinking about 9/11, and what happened right afterwards was what happens a lot of times, a blame game. Who's responsible? How do we hold them accountable? Who amongst us, because this was an attack on our homeland, who among us is the threat? And I started to see an emergence of an us and them mentality. And one of the things I love about being a United States citizen is that there is opportunity for people, for all people, and that we need to look towards people as what's possible, rather than entertain cynical or judgmental, unforgiving, biased. We have to be alert and aware of those things. Working in government, I've always felt, if you don't like something, join government and help change it. So kind of an infiltrator mindset. So I got in there and I worked in the Community Preparedness Division, and I did that for a couple of years, and I learned so much. And part of the program is that you get to do a rotation, and I rotated to the Navy Postgraduate School in Monterey, California, beautiful, wonderful institution. And then when my time came up, the fellowship was over and I was going to move back into a regular position with Homeland Security. They wanted me to move back to Oakland, but Monterey wanted me to stay. And so they said, you can write your own position description. Again, one of the many pinch me moments, like, is this really happening to me? But I had the opportunity to write my own position description to serve as the Homeland Defense and Security Coordinator. Again, it was like working together with people, always looking for opportunities of how I can serve, my gifts can help an overall project or person achieve their vision. I'm always looking for that. In fact, early in my career, I was always thinking I'm the wind beneath the wings. That's where I felt my greatest level of comfort. Not really aspiring to be the big boss, to be in the C-suite, just wanting to be a part of enabling amazing things to happen that couldn't happen without my help, maybe, how I saw things. So I worked there for 10 years, and I got to do some amazing things. I taught at the NATO school in Oberammergau. I got to study piracy. I did almost 8 years of longitudinal research on information sharing in the port environment. So I got to visit all of these maritime ports and even an airport or two across our nation to see how industry and government could work together better. How could we share information so we could create a shared understanding to facilitate collaboration and unity of effort? When we can foster opportunities for us to understand each other, whoa, it really sets a strong foundation for us to work together. After 10 years of being there, again, super grateful heart for all the opportunities I had at the Navy Postgraduate School and all the learning that I did. I got to work with every department. It was amazing, amazing. And then the position opened up for a higher education program manager for FEMA. And I was noticing, and we're right on the heels of the impact and still feeling the storm itself, and definitely all of the response and recovery that's happening for Hurricane Helena. And then FEMA had put forth a notice, hey, we need somebody for our higher education program manager. And that really meant working with institutions. I think there are over 600 institutions worldwide that were working to educate the next generation of emergency management and homeland security professionals. And I thought, what an amazing opportunity to learn from that group and to help create the cohesion and collaboration so that we could really impact and more professionalize that career field. And it's standing on the shoulders of many people. Wayne Blanchard started the program, then I had my little stint, and now it continues on. So it's really wonderful to be a part of that lineage. After I did that for a couple of years, I really noticed, 5 years, I noticed that there was a lot of focus on external. So FEMA works a lot with state, locals, private sectors, non-governmental organizations, and really creates a space and systems to bring all of those efforts together to respond, to prepare first, respond, recover, and mitigate from emergencies and disasters. But what we didn't do as well, from my assessment, was take care of the actual employees of FEMA. And there's a much smaller number of actual employees of FEMA that are actually maintaining that system, doing the training, ensuring the programs are happening. We weren't really focused on developing those employees as much. So I had the opportunity to go and serve as the talent transformation director under the chief learning officer in FEMA. And that was under the HR department. And wasn't there 6 months, and the chief learning officer went off for a different job. So then I had the opportunity to act in that job. And I did that just for a few months before. It was through LinkedIn. I got a ping, would you like to apply for the United States Air Force Chief Learning Officer position? I was like, are you talking to someone else? I couldn't believe it. And then I was like, is this real? And then I thought, well, I know a lot of colonels. I was a liaison to NORTHCOM. I've had a lot of opportunities with Defense Support to Civil Authorities that helps bring military capabilities to address disasters when necessary. So I knew a lot of people in the military environment, and also the Guard. So I started just thinking through my Rolodex, who would be the great next chief learning officer for the Air Force? Who do I know who's from the Air Force? Because I thought you need to really know the community, the systems, and started to forward other applications, but they kept coming back and saying, no, we really want you to apply for the job. And I did, and here I am. I've had it for 3 years, and I cannot tell you how thrilled I am. I feel like a lot of the things I learned from the beginning of my career, working in that state hospital, seeing possibilities all the way up to working through science and research communities, bringing together just different people who don't feel they necessarily fit together, and showing how when we create a shared understanding, there are unending possibilities, and we make the impossible possible together. Individually, no, there's lots of things that are impossible when we just hit it with a few people or by ourselves. But when we are able to really bring people together and build that trusted environment, I believe we're unstoppable. We can really achieve amazing things.
Well, I can tell somebody's unstoppable. It's you. I mean, I'm just listening as you're going through the conversation. I'm just like, people listening, if they're driving in the car, are driving faster because as you're getting excited, I bet you they're getting excited. I get excited when I hear you talk about your work and your career and bring a level of passion to the conversation that oftentimes, people you meet in passing or talk about don't always have. Have you always had that kind of desire to learn, like was clear here? Because you were going through different examples. You were saying things like, I got to do this, and I got to do that. Not I had to do this or they made me do that, but I got to do it. It was a wonderful opportunity. Have you always seen life that way? And how do you help others to do that?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I'm thinking back, mostly yes. But surely, like in high school, there were many things that I felt I had to do.
Yeah.
You could ask my mom. She's a teacher, so probably I got a lot from my mom. She's an art teacher. She was a teacher for 50 years, and she's had an incredible impact on me. And she's a mother of five. Four boys and me in the middle. So you can imagine the chaos that was in our house.
I can.
So lots of
I'm one of five. I
curiosity.
get that.
Lots of curiosity. Um, Yeah, but I think really, like I mentioned, working that first job at the state hospital and seeing and having the experience of different lives, you know, and really cultivating gratitude and being a part of helping and learning. Yeah, so I just feel maybe that was the beginning of it. But certainly as a kid, I was always helpful and creative and imaginative. But sometimes felt like I have to do things. And even today, I think I'm always looking for that balance. Like I have now I'm older in the 50s. And so thinking about, I have a lot underneath my belt about really knowing who I am. And when I start to feel like not excited about things or overwhelmed by things, I notice that, and I think that's really important to notice and to take moments because a lot of times I can't take even a full day, maybe even sometimes I feel that my priorities and commitments, I don't even have like an hour within a day, but I always have a few moments, to get grounded, to reconnect. And I believe that I make the choice. And I'm not sure when that happened in my life too, but I choose gratitude. I choose to be of service. I choose to be mindful of my impact. And I know that when I unblock my own energy and can really truly unleash all my gifts, I feel a lot of energy. And I think that's contagious to other people. Like you said, people are driving faster, maybe. I hope they're being careful. I'm
I'm
also
sure they're
fast
being
driving.
careful.
But I really reflect on that, noticing my impact. And so I know I've been filling up the space with a lot of my talking, but one of the things I found that it's really important to listen and listen in many ways. Listen to words, listen to facial, the whole energy of a person, but also listen to the silence and notice, is the silence giving people time to think? Is the silence giving people opportunity to be distracted, go somewhere else? Is the silence giving people an opportunity to disconnect in a positive or negative way? Just noticing that. And like I said, I really see a lot of possibilities in putting together teams and groups of people that maybe don't always work together. Um, and to do that, you really do have to notice people and check in with people. You have to be present. And I think, well, I talked about how the technology has really emerged, which it makes being present hard sometimes. People are in meetings, and if we don't have our cameras on, we might succumb to opening up that email and going, well, they're talking about something that I don't have anything. Well, I'll just do this. And then 3 minutes past, you don't know really
Yeah.
what was said. And I know I've heard the next generation are much better at multitasking, and that would be amazing. How we're learning how to take in all these feeds. But I also hear from the next generation feeling overwhelmed, feeling anxiety, feeling a lot of these things. And I think that's something to note when we try to spread ourselves too thin by doing too many things. I think that one of the physiological responses is anxiety and uncertainty and disconnect and not feeling good enough, feeling like I can't do anything because I've tried to do too many things. Once a teacher told me, if you go from thing to thing and you dig just all these little holes, you get a whole bunch of potholes. But
Mhm.
if you focus on one thing and you dig a nice hole, you might actually get to water or some gold or
Yeah.
so really taking the time to focus on things and give yourself the gift of truly learning something. And that takes time and focus.
Well, I'd love to talk to you a bit about that focus in regard to there's some people who are listening, maybe they're earlier on in their careers or they're in kind of an individual contributor role, if you will. And there's other people who maybe they aspire to, or they're in a more of a formal leadership role in an organization. I'm just going back to when you talked about how you said I had great leaders in the beginning of my career and probably great leaders throughout your career, but great leaders at the beginning of a career and the long-term trajectory of that as far as their impact over time. And you mentioned how even LinkedIn like said, no, apply for this job. It's almost like, it's almost like an incident of encouragement in that moment. Like you can do this thing, but in those moments where you're a leader or you're a leader in your initial role, you talked about in the facility in California, in those type of situations, what can leaders do to help kind of see and cultivate the unique abilities of individuals?
I think that we need to have conversations with people about their gifts. And I think we need to, I think it's helpful when we see something, a possibility in someone, that we don't hold it inside. Perhaps there was someone who told you, like, Patrick, you're great at having conversations. I feel so comfortable with you, and you're really thoughtful. And when I'm speaking to you, you're pulling out really important things. You would be awesome at doing podcasts. And then as you did them, people were like going, this is great. It encourages you, just like you were talking about when you get that encouragement. I think sometimes people withhold praising other people because they're like, oh, I don't want to be seen as like, I'm trying to build you up, or I'm trying to get something by saying how great you are, that I'll just remain quiet. Or you already know that. I don't need to tell you that. Or maybe even a little bit sadder is that, who am I to say or to make the judgment that you're good at this, And so I would say, really be thoughtful. Look at other people, that what they're doing good, and look also in the mirror and at yourself and notice what you're doing good. I think that it's really important, whether you're a new leader or or you're a veteran leader, that we take the time to look in the mirror and reflect on the things that we're really doing well and the things that we're not doing well. You said I worked for a lot of great leaders, and I did. And I worked for some of those same leaders weren't always good leaders every moment. Yeah. And then I've worked with other people who had moments of great leadership, but that was very hard sometimes working with them because they struggled with communication, or they had a very fixed mindset about how things could be and maybe alienated or didn't bring people together as well as maybe as I thought was possible. I think it's important that we reflect and look at what can we do. I say listening is so important, and it's something that I'm always working on. After I'm in an engagement or in a meeting or anything, I many times reflect, did I miss an opportunity to really to express care? I think that's one of the most important things that we do as a leader is express care.
As you said,
when we care.
I'm sorry, Wendy, but as you said, if you don't mind, when you were talking about like looking in the mirror, it's that level of self-awareness around it, honestly, or the idea of like not looking at your device constantly type of thing. It's the situational awareness. So
Yeah.
you think about like as a leader, the need to be both self-aware and situationally aware and in connect. Are those sound like pretty key things to be able to do to help people feel supported, to help people feel seen, to help people feel like they belong to a team? From your perspective, like what are just like tactical things you could do? I have a team, you have a team, I'm sure. And with your team, sometimes how do you actually live out helping them feel supported and seen in those type of things?
Yeah. Well, I listen and I ask questions and I create space for them to respond. I have a new person who's working with me, a new program analyst. And it's interesting. You say you have a team. I have like a big team. Like I work with a bunch of people across the Air Force, but actually direct reports. I'm more in an advisory role to the generals here on learning. So I don't have a giant team. When I was at FEMA, I had a much bigger team, but this is different. But I have a new person who worked with me who is amazing. And she asks a lot of questions. And I keep checking in with her because we were just starting and we're building kind of our relationship. And so I ask her, how is your week going? Is this job what you expected it to be? Are there any things that you want to, that now that you've been in the job for a month, that you're thinking, oh, I really would like to do more of this, or I'm not sure that I have all the training I need to do this, and I'd like to learn more about this. Like giving people space that you can have those authentic and, I know they say psychologically safe environments. I think that's really important. And I've started to use the word psychologically caring environments. So I really am asking her, I'm not expecting her to know everything about a certain software, but have you used this before? Oh, I've used it before. The way that we're looking at it, do you feel comfortable doing this? Giving a person a space so that they can say, I don't know this. So it's not so much about just how we feel, but actually having kind of that evidence base, like I can do it, I can't do it, I have space to do it. I always say one of my least favorite phrases is fake it till you make it. And I know there's some benefits maybe to that, but mostly I see you have to do that in environments where you're not welcome, completely holistically welcome, because someone has an expectation of you that you don't feel you maybe have a competency or access or authority or many other things that maybe make it less possible for you. And so I don't want people to fake it till they make it, because I'd rather hear where you're struggling and how we can work together so that you can grow and learn and not have to fake it, but shine your gifts of who you are, or partner. Say, this isn't really what I do, but I know I'm partnering with this person and they'll be able to help me make this a reality. I think that's really important when we work with our teams, is that we give, that space of psychological care, that sometimes you might hire someone and they come and tell you, well, I don't really know how to do this. Well, it was part of the job description. You are supposed to be able to do this. I hired you because this is your job. And okay, do you give that person an opportunity to learn and grow? Do you support them in that way? Do you set milestones so you have clear expectations and they have clear expectations? Or do you just kind of float on and allow frustration and irritation to build up till you're creating a greater chasm between you and that person? And you might think, oh, they don't notice. They notice. We
Yeah, they definitely
notice.
notice.
We
They
feel
definitely,
it.
and nothing ever seems to get better left unsaid for a while, right? It just it just
Yeah.
builds up, as you said. How do you find that, as if I'm a leader listening to this, or in your role with your team, that balance between people and performance? Because sometimes you have situations where it's like somebody is really good at taking care of people and people feel very heard and valued, but team wise, we're not really delivering great results. On the other hand, you have some where the team might be like grinding out great results, but they're doing it in ways that are destroying the fabric of the team and eroding trust among team members. How do you find you can facilitate the balance of performance and people?
Yeah. Well, I think people are first, because you can't have much performance without people. Even though we have a lot of machines that are able to do things, they're not replacing people. There's always the human in the loop, that's coding the machine, that's working together with the machine. So I don't believe there's much performance that happens without people. So it's interesting, the question. I think you have to start with the people, and that if you just grind things out and people are expendable, you'll hit a top point where you won't be able to progress much further. And if you invest in people, but you tie them to the performance, to the purpose, then you're creating meaningful work for the people. Like, I I think a lot of people, not just me, but I think a lot of people don't mind working really hard when you see the fruits of what you've done. That something was a certain way and you worked really hard over this 6 months or this year, and now there's a new program, there's a new possibility, there's a new product, and you are part of that. It's like meaningful purpose. And so if you are just like taking care of people and are like, everybody's good and we're just floating along and we're just checking boxes and getting things done, that can be soulless too. So you're creating a social network, but you're not, when you can add meaningful purpose. I love working in public service. I work for the United States people. They pay my salary. Like the things I do are helping to ensure that we have national security, are hopefully deterring war and allowing people to live safely in this country. And if a war does happen, we're ready. We've been working towards ensuring that our force is ready. That work is extremely important. And I want every airman who works across civilian, enlisted, officer, reservist guard, I want them to know how they fit into that, and growing their competencies ties to this ability for us to meet our mission. And so I don't think, I could see how you could see it as kind of a balance, but I think you have to have the people in order to have, to really optimize. I think it's an integration rather than a balance. Maybe that yin and yang symbol
Yeah.
kind of comes to
Yeah,
mind,
yeah,
that
yeah.
it can't be. Yeah.
We use
So
an
that's a
expression.
balance too.
We use an expression at Franklin Covey when it comes to engaging people, engaging employees. How to tell if people are engaged in their work is if they can answer to the affirmative, respond to this statement: I feel like I'm a valued member of a winning team doing meaningful work in an environment of trust. And if I can hit
Yes.
those things down, those are like it's like you said, it requires these. It's like I want to say an equation because it sounds like we're just trying to line enough of everything up, but it really does have a bit of you need these different ingredients in the soup to make it really good. I need to feel valued. I need to feel like,
Yeah.
we're winning, because if you've ever been on a team that's not winning, that can be pretty tough for a while. I mean, you're not going to win on everything, but you're going to learn from it and move forward. But if you feel like you're consistently like you're in a business and the doors are getting shut down around you, that's not a great place to be. So I have to be on a winning team doing work that matters, meaningful work, and then an environment of trust. I can step up, as you said, Wendy, and say to, as a leader, say to my team, or as a new team member, say like, I don't know how to do this, or I'm trying to figure this thing out. I have found, you see what you think, but I have found in my career that when I am leading, quote unquote, a team, that if I just come to them and just say something like, I'm really not sure how to handle this, but I'm trying to figure my way around it. Could you all help me think it through? Surprisingly to some people, but not to me, after being open about that a few times with people, they actually want to see their leader win. They actually are like, hey, let me help you out. Or have you thought about it this way? Type of thing. It's actually it's almost a superpower for the team to be able to do that type of thing.
It's interesting because I think that question, and I'm not sure how to do this, can you help me with this? That is the V in your statement. That's value. You're valuing somebody and you're asking them to help you because you feel they can.
Yeah.
And that's a good feeling. When somebody asks me for help, I absolutely want to help them and figure out what's the little part I can do that might take it to the next level or support that person. I think we all want that, to be invited. I love Peter Block wrote this book called Community, Building Structures of Belonging, and he outlines these 6 conversations. How can we invite people? So when you ask somebody, will you help me? That's like an invitation, and then when they come, well, let me understand your problem. What are the possibilities, and generating those? So having conversations about what might be possible from the variety of perspectives. And then you could ask me, but if I never follow through, like, oh yeah, I'll look something up for that, and then you don't hear me, we see each other 6 months later, and I'm kind of like, oh, I never did that for Patrick. And how do you have conversations about ownership that continue to create that sense of belonging? So we're committed to each other, and we have a clear understanding of when, like, oh yeah, I need that. You need to fix this or address this issue within a week or within a year. That might offer different possibilities. And then having space for dissent, so that if you ask me the question, do we have a strong enough relationship, that I said to you, Patrick, that's an interesting question and challenge, but I'm not quite sure you have it right. So from my perspective, I'm thinking this might be what's the relationship where you go, oh my gosh, I told her what I needed, and here she is coming up with her own, she made it all about Wendy, or however you might, because we haven't created a safe space, a trusted space where we can have dissent, where you're like, she's not trying to one up me. She's not trying to sabotage me. She's not trying to really not help me, but she actually is trying to expand my thinking on this and make sure no one's wasting time. How do we have those conversations? And then the commitment conversation, and also very importantly, the gifts conversation. You ask me, but I'm not quite sure, but I know other people who have gifts, or I could learn this, or I might not be able to do exactly what you're saying, but I could do this, and creating space for how we could work together. I think I mentioned that because one of the things I've noticed is that in our leadership training and other things, we don't always talk about how to have a conversation, and we don't practice it then. We practice, like as supervisors, how to correct an employee when they have a problem. But what about finding, noticing it before? How do we have the conversation about noticing that doesn't put the person on the defensive right away, that creates the trusted environment? Like, I'm noticing it. That you haven't been using the software that I think would really help us to move forward? Oh, well, I really don't know how to use it, or
Yeah.
just get off my back. What kind of environment have we created? And I think another thing that I thought about when I first got in that's continued to be a theme was there's a self-determination theory, and Daniel Pink wrote a book, Drive, that makes it really accessible. I think the motivational scientific psychology it gets really meaty with some of the research, but the idea is very, I think, pretty easy, and that you're looking to build a competency, so you know how to do it, and that's clear. We have good competency models that people know how to measure that. Oh, I've got a basic level, or I have an intermediate or advanced level, and we clearly understand, have a shared vision around competency models. Then we have the autonomy. Actually, I told you, or you saw the behaviors, that I have an advanced competency at this, so you let me do the job. You let me do it. And I think the Air Force is really good at building competent airmen and allowing them and expecting them to do the job. And then when it comes to the belonging, which is the third aspect, how are we doing at that? So. I think sometimes we're like, okay, this is going well, but sometimes if things aren't going well, we may slip into that us and them mentality.
Yeah.
And that is a lot because of some of the systems, structures, policies are linear and hierarchical. Of course, we're using military structures, so there's a rank structure. So how do we create more of a net-centric way of being with each other, of helping people to grow, and really seeing how there is a sense of belonging, how we fit together? How do we do that? How do we develop systems that do that? And this is not just a military issue. I've worked in other government settings and industry as well. These linear hierarchical structures make the network invisible, which makes it very challenging for us to optimize what we want to do and the growth that we have, because we're trying to fit this way or that way. And it's just not, it's not natural right now. So I think it's an exciting time right now for leaders to look at their organizations and identify where are the systems and policies that we've created and just kept going on and on and on that maybe no longer serve us. And how might we reimagine them to be more net-centric, to allow more trust and autonomy to build what is needed, but also to connect us as a community.
Yeah, 'cause some of those systems are maybe terribly efficient, but not particularly effective sometimes, because they aren't creating the teams and the interaction and really allowing the interdependency of the organization to actually flourish. As we were going through this, Wendy, I knew it before we even started recording. I'm like, I'm enjoying this conversation. We better start recording it. And when I say like the energy that you bring and the insights you bring, I mean that in such a complimentary way, because it's like, I'm just engaged in this conversation. People didn't start listening and feel at this moment like, boy, that was a waste of time. I mean, they listen and they go, that was so helpful and useful. And you mentioned a couple of times, like, the desire to help people. So I'm going to ask you one question as we kind of wrap up our talk today. When you think about all the different people who listen to the podcast, they're in very different parts of their journeys. Right? Someone maybe very early on in the career, and some other might be more in a twilight of their career. Some people might be very technical without any direct reports or contributing to a team. And some people may have large teams or lead teams of teams. So they're kind of all over the spectrum. But what everybody has in their own way is they have the desire to get better or the desire to achieve something, whatever they define that looks like for them. So I would just ask you, if you were to talk to a broad range of people like you are right now, like regardless of where they are in their careers, what would you encourage them to do in order to continue to progress forward?
That is a great question. And I'm going to give an answer that I'm not an expert at yet. I'm still working on it. And that is pacing. I think pacing is such an important thing as we grow into our jobs and the possibility of who we are as people and leaders. I think for myself, I've really set a lot of goals and pushed myself very hard, and pushed myself to points of like, okay, I'm burnt out, and now I'm going back up, and now I'm burnt out, and now, and I think as I've gone along, early in my career, it was harder to notice until like I would get physically sick. And so I guess I would say to people, really notice your own energy levels of what you're putting towards towards your work, towards your family. I think there are these exercises I did really early in my career where you have like a wheel of life, all the different variables or factors of your life. How much attention are you giving to those? How well do you feel you're progressing in those areas? And I was always thinking, how can I push the wheel out to tens, and keep rolling? And I think a lot of us want to be able to do that, and until we get in the burnout state, and then we're like, if I can just not be a zero.
Yeah.
And so I think really thinking about pacing, I love running. I'm a slow runner, but a consistent. I love, keeping my body physical. And so, but even then I see it like I leave my yard like as fast as I can. And they say, pace yourself, the first mile should be the slowest. And then you build it. I never have been able to do that yet. Like maybe one time or a couple of times has been like an anomaly, but it's been very hard. So that's something I've been thinking a lot about, that I'm learning, that I've been learning across my career. And I think I would be excited if people would be also thinking about that, and collectively we could help each other to find ways to pace throughout our careers that helped us really to maximize our potential and our outcomes with each other, to really make a big difference. I think that might be
No, that's a
that might
great
be
point. And part of it is like just knowing what your pacing feels like and being in tune to other people around you as well. Because
yeah
some people,
yeah
this is not what, some people may come out of the gate a little bit stronger and they can sustain a bit of a pace. But you're right. Sometimes they go out really hard. Next thing you know, they're walking, sitting down, get me a drink. I need to take a break. I mean, and, which is totally fine to take a break and all those things, but recognizing that you don't have to run to the wall. I actually watched this thing the other day about this distance runner he'd never competed at like the 13.1 mile half marathon races. He competed like 1,500, 5,000, whatever it might be. And he was world class. And he didn't have the best race that he wanted to have in that first half marathon. But how he described it is, he said, I ran as hard as I could until I felt like I was going to die. And then I stopped, caught my breath, and then I ran as hard as I could and fought until I felt like I was going to die. And then I stopped, and then I finished the race. And guess what? He didn't come in first. The people who came in first were the ones that paced themselves well through that race. And he has to
yeah
learn how to run that distance successfully. Well, hey, we learned so much in this conversation today. I really appreciate you joining me for a C-suite
yeah
conversation. And I just wish you all the best in San Antonio. I hope you have a nice weather
Yay.
today, tomorrow, and well through the rest of the year. Thanks so much, Wendy, for joining me.
Thank you.
Well, folks, that's all I have for today's episode. Big thanks to Dr. Wendy Walsh for joining me today to share insights from her career. Whether you're early on in your career yourself, somewhere along the way, or maybe you've risen to a level that Wendy's at, I hope you can find ideas that she shared that'll be helpful to you. That's all I have for today. Thanks so much for joining me. My name's Dr. Patrick Ledden. Now go make it a great day.